Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. As it was just told, I'm going to talk about the birds in the viticultural areas, and I'd like to make the connection on protecting biodiversity of birds while enhancing the ecological functions in viticultural areas. It was mentioned yesterday that a lot of animals provide ecosystem services for us. So yeah, I'm going into detail in my presentation. There was actually a mention of this book yesterday in the first presentation. It's from 1962 from Rachel Carson, and she wrote a book about the DDT use in the 40s and 50s in the USA. And this quote, I think it's quite relevant today, because as Ilona showed yesterday, humans are quite keen to simplify the landscape, to make it easier to work it, and also in the process of that, they are undoing the built-in checks we have. So the balances are getting out of control in sometimes, and there's a lot of pest species in the agricultural areas, and that this was said in 1962 is quite astonishing to me. And if this little advertisement is a real advertisement for DDT from the 40s or 50s, that it's a benefactor for all mankind. And if you know the DDT crisis, robins were falling out of trees because of it. It's not only poisonous to wildlife, it was used as an insecticide, but it killed a lot of birds, and it's quite poisonous for humans as well, so it was forbidden later on, but this book is still quite relevant. I just read it again. So, why do I focus on birds? Birds are quite nice indicators for the landscape. They indicate in what state their habitat, if they use it, it is in. And as an example, I have the skylark. It's this little brown bird. You can see it in the fields. It flies quite high and sings in the air and flies around, and it sounds quite nice. And the skylark is predominantly in the grassland area. Oh, there's a typo. And they avoid woody areas. So they're eating insects in the grassland, and they're digging little holes to put their nest in. So they are ground breeders, and so they're quite relevant for the agricultural area. And as the skylark, there are a lot of birds that are quite restricted for the area they can live in. And as an example, I have here the European stone chat. It's this little bird. It's quite nice to look at, I guess. I don't know, it's a common in France. Okay. And as you can see from the orange lining, it's predominantly in the single shrub area or shrubs with little gaps in it. So it needs bare ground to find insects, but it also needs some shrubs to sit on and sing. And the Eurasian blackcap, it's a quite common bird in Germany as well, needs some edges and trees in their habitats, and they are not dominant in areas where there's not a lot of edges or trees. And here we have, I find quite interesting, this graph is quite almost as old as me. And here is the common wood pigeon. It's quite a cultural follower, so it has quite similar living condition expectations as we have. So it follows us into the cultural landscape, but originally the wood pigeon was in the woods. So it needs some trees in their habitat, and those 3 bird species can show you how the habitat is doing, if they're having everything they are needing, and so we can use them to check on the quality of the habitats. And why is this important for my talk? I have here an overview of the conservation status of some bird species. And for those estimations, these groups of birds that use different habitat types are pooled, and you can estimate the state of their habitats. And as you can see from this graph, it's quite sad actually. 40% of birds in the EU are in a poor or bad state, so they have declining population trends, and only 47% are in a good state. And that's especially true for water birds. Then I want to talk about the viticultural area, so we are getting to it. So here we have the state of the birds in the agricultural landscape in the EU. And as you can see, here are those pooled species. Here are the farmland species. And as you can see, they're declining quite rapidly. It's a 17% decline in the last 30 years, almost 30 years. And as you heard yesterday, this isn't the status quo, so they are declining longer than this graph shows. But here you can see that forest species are actually increasing. So if you look at the pooled species, you don't necessarily see the different types of birds that are profiting from our cultural landscape, or actually don't profit. Yes. And because we are in France, I have here a graph from France. Here you can see the impact of the agricultural landscapes on different bird groups. And as you can see here, the generalist, so they are quite, they don't have a lot of restrictions in their diet or in their nesting places. And those are actually increasing by 22%. But if you look at the agricultural area, and it's not quite good that this is, if you look at the agricultural area, it's actually a decrease by 38%. And that's quite a lot. And if we go back in the whole EU, it's there was a 17% decline, and in France it's 38%, which is almost double. No, more than double. Yeah. So it's quite necessary to do forums like this, where you can inform the practitioners, and the practitioners can give their feedback to researchers. So the aim is to help the nature, to help birds and nature in general. So there isn't only one cause for those trends. There are a lot of causes, and that makes it quite difficult to tell practitioners you have to do a specific thing and everything will be good. But there are 3 main causes for the decline in bird species, and all goes back to the intensification of agriculture. We talked about this quite a lot in these 2 days, so I will make it short. You have the landscape homogenization, that's not a vineyard, that's in agriculture, and there are regions you have a view over hills and everything, because there isn't a lot of structure in the landscape to maximize production. And you have a narrowed and uniform crop rotation in this annual crops. There are large fields with only one crop species, and not many species of birds are able to cope with that because they need different structures in the habitat to survive. And then we have the fertilizers and pesticides. We talked about that quite extensively, and those are also problematic for most bird species. So let's talk about viticulture. It's why we're here. And my project is I researched the bird community in viticultural areas in Germany, in the Rheingau and Rheinhessen-Hesse regions. And that's a picture from there. And studies suggest that the viticultural area will increase, not increase, but maybe move to different areas because of the climatic changes that are going on. And we have a conflict of agriculture areas like food production, but we have the settlements that are increasing as well because, well, we are increasing and we need a lot of space to live. And so it is quite possible that vineyards are replacing even more semi-natural habitats in the future. So it's quite relevant to look at this. Here we have the utilized agricultural area of the whole EU. I think it's quite important to know how much space is used for viticulture, and many of you know that, I guess, but only 1.8% of the agricultural area is used for viticulture. And when you look at the different countries that are cultivating wine, you can see Germany is actually quite a small space we use for viticulture. But if you look at France or Spain, it's with 25%, it's quite a lot of area. So let's talk about the birds, at least. So we have this viticultural landscapes, and potentially they could be quite attractive for a lot of birds. They are very stable as a habitat in comparison to annual crops that are removed every year, or even more often. So there are the vines, and they can get quite old, so the habitat is quite stable. Then we have, in best case scenario, interrow vegetation. There can be a lot of insects nesting and feeding there and pollinating. And so we have a lot of insect-eating birds. And then we have a mosaic of semi-natural habitats in the surroundings, like trees and shrubs and edges. We heard quite a bit about it, and most bird species like those structures. In reality, it's quite different most of the time. It's quite a homogeneous monoculture. You remember the picture Ilona showed yesterday, as it was in the 1950s, and it is today. We have a lot of pesticide and fungicide input in those fields, which kills the food of most birds. We have a lot of tillage and frequent mowing, so the earth is turned quite a lot. And if you're a bird and have your nest there, it's quite disturbing. And we have the sorting of the landscape. In those valleys, this is it the Rheingau? I'm not quite sure. But our valleys look quite like this. We have the river in the middle, then we have some settlement, then we have a lot of viticulture, quite concentrated, and on the top of the hill there are the semi-natural habitats and forests in some cases. So it's quite sorted, it's not a mosaic, which is quite favorable for most birds. So we have a pretty homogeneous landscape. I do have a picture like Ilona has. It's quite the same. It's a different area. It's from a publication of ours. It's in German. So yeah, we've already seen this, so we'll skip this. And now I want to talk about the influences on different levels. I will talk about the landscape level because most wine growers don't influence the landscape level except for planting some structures in best case scenario. I will talk then about the management strategies that influence the bird community. So this are my data. It's a paper about birds and the influence of the landscape on them. And as you can see from this graph, I showed it here in some pictures. If you have vines, but also a forest and bushes in the landscape, you have quite a lot of birds there. These are individuals, and you have quite a lot more than if you have a purely viticultural area. And in the middle, we have the vines and semi-natural habitat that are better than only viticulture, but with less individuals than with forests and bushes. And this is targeted on insectivores. Those are the birds that eat a lot of insects. So they can, these are especially interesting for the viticulturist because they can eat pest species as well. I mean, they are eating the insects that are helping the viticulture as well, but with the right balance, it can be quite profitable. So let's recap. So on a landscape level, a higher level of viticultural area strongly negatively affects birds. And if you have more semi-natural habitats, you have a higher bird diversity. In the slide before, it was the individuals that were more, and now we have the diversity, which is quite the same picture. So now I will talk about the management influence. The thing about research and the thing about nature is nothing is black and white. So species react quite differently to different managements, but also to structures in the landscape. So I can't tell you what is the non plus ultra, the best solution for the declining trends of birds. But you can do some management regimes that are more favorable than others. So to clarify that, here's a graph from a paper where there were 3 groups of birds. I talked about this before. These birds eat a lot of insects. These birds eat a lot of seeds. And here are all birds that are abundant in the field, pooled. And as you can see, they compared a control site, which is a site with a bare ground and a lot of tillage. Then you have the chemical management of the vegetation, and you have a mechanical management of the vegetation. And as you can see, the mechanical management is quite favorable to insectivores that can eat a lot of pest insects, and also to all the birds. For the granivorous, so the seed-eating bird, it's not really a difference. It's a little bit less at the mechanical level. They are not dependent on insects, so they are not as influenced as the insectivores. So if you manage your plots manically, you favor insectivores and the overall bird community. Yeah, here we have the woodlark. It's related to the skylark. It's quite, it is expanding in our region at the moment, which is quite nice because it's not very abundant everywhere. And here I want to make the case that not every species reacts the same way in the vineyard. Because the skylark, as you can see from this graph, likes it not only some vegetation in the field, but also likes open ground. Because they forage on the bare soil and pick insects out of there, and if there's too much vegetation, they don't find them. So this species, if you want to favor this species with your management, you should do a species-rich interrow vegetation, but with some bare cover in between. And I think that's quite nice for the viticulturist, because the under the vines, there's no competition between the greenage and the vines. And if that is bare ground, the woodlark is able to forage for insects, and also the insects are able to live there because there's a lot of ground vegetation. Yes. So to summarize this, few species can actually persist in purely viticultural areas. There are some species that thrive in those areas. It's like I always hear about the starling problem. They actually can fly a long way to get their food, so they don't mind that they can't live there. They're just going there to eat and flying back home. And so these species are quite adapted to our practices. But if you have a lot of structures in the vineyard and adapt your management regimes to promote biodiversity, you can create quite a favorable habitat for birds. Yes, and here are some management strategies, as I said before, because of the woodlark species, which is an open habitat species, and those species are really declining right now. I showed you the graph of France with a 38% decline, and those species like some open ground. And on the right side, I have the horizontal viticulture, which is a plot of Ilona's research. And as you can see, you can plant flowers that are there multiple years. So it's not those flowers you plant and then you tillage and you bring out new seeds. They can persist there, and you can drive your tractor in those bare grounds that are also favorable for all bird species that forage there. And the same thing with the steep slope. Is it a steep? I don't know. It's a slopey area. Then mechanical instead of chemical management favors bird communities. On the left side, you have quite a popular form of management of the vineyards. There are heavy herbicide spraying under the vine, and there's this soccer field grass in between. which is always kept short, like in the English gardens, and yeah, not many species can get anything out of this area. So if you have the room, here's a quite nice meadow right next to the vineyard plot, and it's quite dry there, so there's a lot of species diversity, because not all species can persist, and they can grow with some bare ground in between. Installing nest boxes is a tool to favor birds, those who use nest boxes, which are the ones normally breeding in holes in the trunks. And this is a blue tit, and they eat quite a lot of insects, especially when they're breeding. And you shouldn't hang those nest boxes in your viticultural fields. It's quite important to put them outside in some less heavy managed areas, so they can thrive and don't get disturbed as much. Then you can provide nesting aids and perches. Birds of prey use them and eat a lot of mice in the field, so your roots are safe with those animals around. And here the common kestrel eats a lot of mice, and the barn owl. And the presence of birds of prey also inhibits fruit-eating species to go there and eat your grapes. So it's a double win. And last but not least, but we heard this quite a lot, you should promote the structural diversity in the vineyards. Here you can see the Rheingau area. It's at the Niederwalddenkmal. It's from the war with France, actually. And as you can see here, there's nothing in the landscape except for, well, roads and viticultural area, and there's not a lot of birds in those areas. And here you have a quite nice area with a lot of structure. And if you want to promote agricultural bird species, it's also necessary to provide meadows, not only trees and bushes, because most open habitat species avoid high structures to see predators coming. Yeah, that's from a publication of mine. I gave an overview of the effects of some measures you can do in your plots and what effect it has on viticulture and nature. And what I have found quite nice, I don't know this winery, and I don't get money for showing it, but when I see birds on bottles, I buy them. And so I think it's quite a nice marketing strategy. You can show that you are doing something for nature and for biodiversity, and you have this really nice pictures of birds, and you can do it in black and white, so it looks less childish, I guess. But those species are quite common in agricultural areas, even in viticultural areas. And they are donating some of their profit for bird projects. So it's quite a nice look, and it's quite a nice project, I guess. Okay, if you want to learn more, I work at the Hochschule Geisenheim, and we have the Competence Center Cultural Landscape at the Hochschule. And we do, some talks by experts and by practitioners, and we are trying to connect those two because it's a huge problem in Germany as well. that there's not a lot of overflow of the research information into the practitioner practices. So yeah, that's our mission, and you can register for the newsletter or for some yeah, conferences. Yes. And at least I have a little fun fact. This is the research from Australia, but they showed that if you provide perches for birds, which are quite cheap, I guess, you can reduce pest bird predation on your grapes. And I think that's quite a nice way of promoting some birds in your vineyard. Okay, then thank you for your attention, and that was my presentation.